The final result at the Mexican Grand Prix looked simple on paper. Lando Norris won from pole, and McLaren strengthened its position as the dominant force of the season's final stretch. But behind the numbers, there was a more complex story, one that explained how two drivers in identical machinery could experience two completely different races. Norris conquered the low-grip Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez with absolute composure, fast when he needed to be, cautious when it mattered, and untouchable over 71 laps. "It was one of the cleanest races of my career," he said afterwards. Oscar Piastri, by contrast, lived an entirely different weekend. He started 7th, finished 5th, but never found a rhythm. "I'm driving in a way that's not natural to me," he admitted. "What normally works doesn't anymore." Team principal Andrea Stella downplayed any mechanical issue, calling it simply a matter of interpretation, how each driver extracts the car's potential in different ways. "The car is very fast," Stella said, "but it's demanding." And that, in essence, was the Mexico City Grand Prix, a tale of brilliance and burden, where McLaren's speed illuminated a growing divide inside its own garage. If you enjoy analysis that digs beneath the lap times, into the layers of psychology, engineering, and form, make sure you're subscribed. Because McLaren's story right now isn't just about pace, it's about identity. Norris's win wasn't just emphatic, it was surgical. In the thin Mexico City air, where downforce is scarce and cooling margins are thin, every detail matters. McLaren managed tyre degradation perfectly, and Norris executed a strategy so precise that Red Bull and Mercedes never looked capable of responding. His rhythm, lap after lap, reflected a driver whose connection with the car had transcended calculation. It was instinctive, as if the MCL 39 was an extension of his thought process. That harmony was missing for Piastri. The Australian has spent the past few weekends fighting a subtle shift in McLaren's balance, particularly under braking and mid-corner rotation. "It's not quite suiting my natural driving style," he said to Formula1.com, "so I'm having to adapt." In previous races, his adaptability masked those cracks, but Mexico's surface, a mix of low grip and variable wind, amplified them. The same car that looked planted and predictable under Norris became nervous and hesitant under Piastri. The difference wasn't dramatic enough to suggest a problem. 5th place in this field is still strong, but it revealed something deeper, that McLaren's developmental arc, while successful, is slowly tuning itself toward Norris's preferences. The more the car's front end bites, the better he becomes. The more responsive it feels on entry, the more it belongs to him. For Piastri, that sharpness feels foreign. His smooth, geometric style, the kind that thrives on stability, now needs constant recalibration. It's not the first time a top team has drifted subtly toward one driver's DNA. Red Bull did the same with Verstappen in 2022, Mercedes with Hamilton at its peak. In each case, the development direction wasn't political, but practical. When a car wins, you chase what makes it win faster. McLaren's engineers have simply followed the physics, but what Mexico made visible was how thin the line can be between an ideal setup for one driver and discomfort for another. The technical context explains part of it. The MCL 39's upgrades since Singapore have revolved around a more aggressive aerodynamic balance, particularly through the floor edges and front wing wake. The car now rewards sharper turn-in and heavier trail braking, something Norris naturally thrives on. His confidence in feeling the rear slide slightly before it grips again gives him that small but crucial time gain through mid-speed corners. Piastri, meanwhile, prefers a more stable rotation and minimal movement at the rear. In Mexico, that contrast became a microcosm of their seasons. In pure numbers, Norris's dominance looked absolute. A commanding pole, unchallenged pace, and a race that barely flickered with threat. Verstappen's early skirmish with Hamilton took attention elsewhere, but in reality, neither ever looked close to matching McLaren's rhythm. Even as tyre wear became critical late in the race, Norris's telemetry showed near-perfect management, maintaining speed without oscillation, never asking more than the car could sustainably give. That level of control defines champions. What made it fascinating, though, was that McLaren's success also highlighted its greatest internal test. Norris's rise, calm and relentless, now puts him not just ahead in points, but ahead in confidence. Piastri remains composed, but the subtext of his interviews hints at the quiet frustration of chasing a moving target. He knows the pace is there, it's just living on the other side of the garage. Andrea Stella's task now is to keep the equilibrium. He's spoken often about how McLaren must avoid internal friction and allow both drivers to feel ownership of the car. That's easier said than done when performance begins to tilt one way. The Mexican weekend was evidence that success can challenge harmony as much as failure can. Stella's tone remained calm post-race, calling Piastri's effort solid and encouraging despite the gap. But beneath that diplomatic surface lies a familiar Formula One tension: how to let one driver soar without leaving the other behind. There's a historical resonance here too. McLaren has been at this crossroads before. Hamilton and Alonso in 2007, Prost and Senna in 1989. Those were years when equality on paper turned into imbalance on track. The current situation is nowhere near as combustible, but it still carries the same philosophical question. Can a car truly serve two masters when its evolution begins to mirror one's instincts? The Mexico result then wasn't just a race victory. It was a statement about synergy: mechanical, mental, emotional. Norris has matured into a driver who no longer overdrives, who knows when to let the car do the work and when to impose his will. Piastri, for all his precision, is still in the adaptation phase. And in Formula One, adaptation often comes with pain. Still, it would be a mistake to frame this as division. McLaren's culture under Stella has been intentionally collaborative. Both drivers share data openly. Both remain on speaking terms that would make past McLaren duos envious. The difference is simply one of rhythm. Norris's dance with the MCL39 is fluent. Piastri's is technical. As upgrades accumulate and the title fight intensifies, that rhythm could decide more than just who finishes ahead. It could decide the shape of McLaren's next car. Mexico also reaffirmed Norris's growing command off track. The boos that followed his podium were, in his own words, a good sign. He handled them with understated defiance. If they're booing, it means you're winning. That composure mirrors the mental clarity he's shown all season. He doesn't need to perform dominance, he simply embodies it. From a championship perspective, this was the weekend McLaren's campaign crystallised. Norris moved 1 point clear in the standings. Verstappen's retirement shock reverberated through Red Bull's camp, and Hamilton's clash left Mercedes bruised. But inside McLaren, the focus is narrower. Continue refining a car that's on the edge of brilliance without letting that edge cut the harmony between its two young stars. In practical terms, that means long hours in the simulator, cross-referencing data, and exploring setup flexibility. Stella has already hinted at minor floor revisions to give Piastri more stability at entry for the coming rounds. The goal isn't favouritism, it's equilibrium. But equilibrium is fragile when one side of the garage keeps winning. If Norris continues at this level, he'll be difficult to catch. Not because the car is inherently superior, but because his understanding of its behaviour now borders on intuitive. Piastri, meanwhile, will need to rediscover his natural rhythm within an architecture that no longer flatters it. He's capable of doing so. His intelligence and discipline remain exceptional. But the timeline is shrinking as the championship runs into its final stretch. And so, as McLaren packs up from Mexico, the paradox deepens. A team that once struggled for competitiveness has now built perhaps the fastest car on the grid, yet must now manage the invisible weight that comes with success. It's not the technical challenge that's daunting anymore, it's the human one. Because for all the triumph and precision, Formula One remains a sport defined not just by how fast you drive, but how evenly you share the journey. And as Norris ascends while Piastri searches for balance, one question lingers over Woking. Can McLaren truly fight for both of its drivers when the car itself seems to have already chosen its favourite?